A new poll shows former President Donald Trump is beating Governor Ron DeSantis by double digits in DeSantis' home state of Florida. According to Florida Atlantic University Main Street Pollcom Lab's latest study, if the GOP presidential primary were today, 50.3% of Floridians would support Donald Trump versus 30.2% who would go for DeSantis.
Despite the lashing DeSantis is taking in the polls, the Florida governor maintained he could still win the primary despite being steamrolled by Trump in the Real Clear Politics average. Here he is on radio show Wisconsin right now making his point. Let's listen.
This is a state-by-state process. There's not a national poll. There's not a national primary. I know the media trots out these polls. A lot of them, are not necessarily, very well done polls, but it doesn't even matter. We don't have a national primary. We're going to have Iowa. We're going to have New Hampshire. We're going to have South Carolina, and we're the only candidate. There's two candidates that can win the nomination, Trump and me, and I would say that I'm the only one that could win both the nomination and the general election.
I mean, that's interesting. It's not clear to me that those state polls of the earlier states in the primary process are going to help Ron DeSantis in the way that he thinks for two reasons. One, some of those states Donald Trump is still incredibly popular in, and Ron DeSantis is even less well-known and less popular than he is in his home state of Florida. Secondly, Donald Trump didn't need to win Iowa back in 2016 to go on and win the nomination. So I think that he is a unique candidate in some respects. His broader appeal to a base outside of any of these particular states means that he can weather the slings and arrows of some early bad contests better than someone like Ron DeSantis, who's very quickly going to have the media coalesce around he's a loser if he does, in fact, lose those early states. It's similar to Joe Biden, who was able to lose the first three primary states in the 2020 primary, win big in South Carolina, and have the media support.
Yeah, I think drop my pen here, doing poorly in the early states would be the death knell for the DeSantis campaign, really counting on a very strong showing in those early states. If he does do well, there's going to be some coalescing around him he already is the only alternative to Trump. What he said there was accurate. It's Trump or him. And he's making his case that it could be him, and it should be because he'd be more likely to win the general, which, you can debate that. If he does well in the early states, they'll be coalescing around him. Right now, the conservative media, obviously they're boosting him if they're not explicitly Trump, but sometimes there'll be some backing off. There's perception that he's doing missteps, even though honestly his overall poll numbers with respect to Trump, like I was checking, they haven't actually changed all that much over a long period of time. That 20% or so number, it's gone up a little bit, it's come down a little bit as Trump has gotten more attention. Honestly, things haven't changed that dramatically, and probably won't until some of these states vote. If he does well, has a good showing, then the idea is he's going to build on this momentum, and then you would see this gap close in other states. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's the theory of his campaign.
Yeah, well, I think what some people are reading into with the polls is there was this expectation that the Trump indictments were going to hurt him, and they didn't.
No.
And then there's also
not with the Republican primary voters.
Right. And then there's the Florida poll in particular seems damning because Ron DeSantis has been popular in Florida, and Floridians like him. And when you hear narrative, when you hear interviews with folks from Florida who are being asked about the choice between those two candidates, they often will say things like, I love DeSantis as my governor, but I think that Trump would be a better president. They're two Florida men battling it out in that state. And, you can take that in both ways. You can say, well, the Florida numbers aren't so suggestive of what's happening nationally because people in Florida also really especially love Donald Trump, who has Mar-a-Lago and has a home base in Florida.
Sure.
Or you can say, well, if even the people in DeSantis' own state are not willing to choose him as the number one, then his chances elsewhere
Right. Why it's so
damaging.
damaging for him is that a part of the argument he can make of why he's behind in the polls in various places is name recognition. Trump has just so universal name recognition. There's still a lot of people, even a lot of Republicans, who don't know who Ron DeSantis is. That's hard to imagine, but people don't pay as close attention. But harder to make that case in the state of Florida, where obviously he is very well known. He is the governor.
Yeah.
So that's why that's not a great result.
I mean, you also mentioned a few minutes ago this idea that it's debatable which of those two men will have better odds against Joe Biden. interestingly, that electability question is one that very much drives voters. So it might be worth just interrogating that a little bit. I mean, the part of the pitch that Ron DeSantis was expected to have was that because he was more reasonable, because he was more kind of establishment friendly, because he didn't do as many own goals as Donald Trump, didn't engage in the messiness and the criminality and the awkwardness that Donald Trump sometimes brings to the table, that he would be able to carry the torch of Trumpism more efficiently, basically. And therefore have a better chance against Joe Biden, right?
Yes.
I don't know if he has landed that precisely because of his hardcore pivot to these woke issues. And I wonder if there's a tacit understanding or presumption at the very least that there's a world where Ron DeSantis is able to make a strong case against Joe Biden, but Ron DeSantis standing on stage saying we're gonna make woke die and we're gonna make the war on wokeism.
He's not gonna say that on stage against Joe Biden.
Versus
He's saying
Joe
that
Biden
now to win the primary.
Right, but people are making electability decisions in the primary, whether or not you want to believe that to be the case. In the Democratic primary in 2020, we very much understood that the thing that was keeping Joe Biden at the head of the race and was really damaging to Bernie Sanders was this electability question. And people hit Bernie with, but you're a socialist, and in the general, people aren't going to like that. And, will Americans vote for socialism? I mean, every newspaper headline in America. And he had to figure out how to make that case. It wasn't, I don't like Bernie. It was, will someone else vote for Bernie? And if people are asking themselves that question about Ron DeSantis now, when he's being dogged by negative press about how he's like weird, he's kind of awkward, he's not good with people.
He can point to not every poll, but most of the polls have shown him doing a little bit better against Biden than Donald Trump. There have been contrary examples too, but most of them show like a real close race between Biden and whoever it is.
Let me tell you,
and DeSantis doing a little bit better.
The polls in 2020 showed that Bernie Sanders did better than Joe Biden against Donald Trump. And the polls in
I'm not questioning that.
Okay, I'm not saying that you are. Yeah. And the polls in 2016 showed that Bernie Sanders did enormously better against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. But that's not what the media told the public, and I think the public perception still carried the
media,
day.
in 2016, the media was just wrong about that. I think it's obvious that Bernie Sanders would have done better against Trump than Hillary Clinton. I think it's more ambiguous in 2020.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's pretty clear cut for 2016 because Bernie would have just retained some of the voters that Hillary lost in Michigan. Like all the other states would have been the same, and then Michigan and Pennsylvania, where Wisconsin, where Trump narrowly pulled away.
You don't know about DeSantis and Trump. I'm not trying to relitigate those Democratic primaries. I'm just saying I think that there's some genuine ambiguity about what would happen there, but that hurts DeSantis more than it hurts Trump because Trump's pitch was never about like I'm the reasonable insider guy that can do the job. That's more DeSantis's lane. And if DeSantis is just going to be Trump light and also have his own kind of baggage where he's just not especially likable to the public, then he's going to continue struggling in this way.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, DeSantis's pitches, he gets all the same states Trump won, and Georgia, which has a popular Republican governor, and Arizona, which had a popular Republican governor until Trump handpicked a lunatic, are states that stay for Republicans.
I mean, that's the issue. Ron DeSantis is not a Brian Kemp. He could have been a Brian Kemp. There was a lane for him to be a sort of Brian Kemp type. And I'm not even saying that that would have been the advantageous way to go because there are some deficits to being perceived as kind of an establishment go along. But I'm running it through my brain. I don't really know that someone like Ron DeSantis fares better in Georgia. I guess we'll see some polls at some point. Fares better in Georgia than a Donald Trump because Ron DeSantis has stripped himself of the ability to claim that he is reasonable and not terminally online and not ungovernable when he does things like promote this wild, homophobic and simultaneously homoerotic video that he put out where he's trying to accuse Donald Trump of being the king of LGBTQIA rights while he has all these topless pictures of men in the video. And, it seems like lunatic stuff. It's Trumpian in the worst way. And meanwhile, Trump, because of the lawsuits against him, weirdly has adopted this veneer of integrity in the eyes of a lot of people because he's being unfairly prosecuted in their view. And so he's seeming like the more serious guy in the room if Ron DeSantis wants to engage in these kinds of clown shows. It's an unexpected and very interesting development.
We'll see if voters agree with that. I don't know. I think if he gets the nomination, he will not be running any more of the videos you described. But
the Dems are going to hit him on it. He's done the things, and that's the problem with the primary. If you appeal solely to a primary audience without considering
this is the Republican Party's overall problem. Yes, is that what Republican primary voters are willing to tolerate, or what they demand of a candidate, the gap between that and what general election people who might vote for Republicans are going to put up with is probably further apart.
Yeah, and I don't even know that Republicans were demanding or supportive of that video. It got a lot of condemnation from even people on the right.
Okay, we'll have more Rising right after this.